12 minutes to 5, a group spurred on by the Occupy Wall Street protests in the United States doesn't have a charismatic leader. It's been protesting in Wellington Civic Square. We talked about the Dunedin protesters yesterday, today Wellington. For almost a month now, since mid-October, the American protests began on Wall Street. They've spread to many major cities. The protesters are speaking out mainly against economic inequality, corporate greed, as we know. Occupy Wellington lists its demands as a return to real democracy, a government by the people for the people, an economic system that works for 100% of the people. Organisers say the occupation's necessary for reasons including the Pike River mine disaster, legislation passed under urgency without due public diligence, child poverty, the gap between rich and poor. We thought what we'd do today is talk to one of the people involved in the Occupy Wellington movement, because it's quite a big day for the movement across New Zealand, actually. Richard Bartlett, good afternoon.
G'day, Jim. Nice to talk to you.
So you have a whole lot of disparately motivated people. You have no leaders either. Is this correct, by the way?
Absolutely correct, yeah. The word we use is distributed leadership, so everyone's a leader and no one's a leader, I guess.
Is that workable in the long term? It's workable while you're all occupying Wellington. Do you think it's a way of proceeding? Because that's interesting to us in the light of the discussion we've just been having, Richard.
Well, it's certainly been positive thus far. We're making great progress just in terms of setting up a global network between the 2,500 cities that are occupying, getting some open communication channels running without anyone taking a leadership role. I mean, it's been a difficult task over the last month, but we're making progress on it. So just purely from that, I'm quite optimistic.
The media, which is struggling to describe the phenomenon really, we all do, has variously accused you of protesting against capitalism, which doesn't quite seem to hit the nail on the head, against corporate greed, which again seems a bit simplistic.
Absolutely. So, I mean, personally, I don't consider myself protesting. I'm demonstrating. I'm trying to demonstrate that there's a better way of doing things, and I'm not asking for anyone else to do it for me.
What happens at 5:30 tonight, by the way, Richard, just while we're talking?
5:30 is we've called it the People's Parliament. It's an open public forum in Auckland, Wellington, Dunedin and Christchurch simultaneously for people to come together and talk about the issues that they feel are most pressing. Based on the reasoning that it's just from our experience over the last few weeks, it seems to be the people, not the politicians, that are best qualified to talk about these things.
So do you propose an alternative system?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been running an alternative system for a month now in Wellington and for a lot longer in some of the other movements around the world. I should say, the Occupy Wellington means nothing at all unless you acknowledge, first of all, the global Occupy movement, which is 2,500 cities, and then you've got the Arab Spring and the Spanish Indignado. I mean, in Madrid a month ago, there was 500,000 people out on the streets, which you may not have noticed on the mainstream media at all, but there's some kind of global thing going on here, and they're all running on consensus-based decision-making.
God, it sounds like such a middle-aged question. Do you propose such an alternative system? But it is the obvious question to ask. How would it work? I mean, if the People's Parliament got together and it became even more of a groundswell, how's it going to work, Richard?
Well, I was talking about this to a friend of mine, an older friend of mine, telling me about how much of a wonderful time we're having with this consensus-based decision-making. And she said, that's lovely, dear, but we tried that in the 60s and it failed. My reply to that was that there is a difference now, and that is, and that we live in the age where information transfer is completely free, and we've got information technology on our side. So I'm working with a team of IT developers in Wellington to build a system where we can have open discussion and make consensus-based decision-making at a global scale. And
does that mean do we still have a parliament, Richard?
Oh, absolutely. The parliament can do what it likes, but when it sees what's happening, what the will of the people is, then I'm sure that they might correct their thinking to align more closely with it.
So how does that work if you make a decision? How is it enforced?
I'll give you an example. In Spain right now, every citizen of Spain has got a digital ID card, and someone has taken it upon themselves to set up a website, and it's not binding of anything at all. It's just a social experiment where every single decision that's going through Parliament that day, you can vote on it. You use your ID card to say, I'm a citizen and this is my vote. And they're just compiling the list, and they just call it, this is the will of the people, and then we'll just put it out there and let people decide if it relates to the will of the government or not. And it doesn't have to be enforced, because you'll see the people will cry out when you hear a unified voice, then the Parliament will respond accordingly.
We've all read Animal Farm, haven't we? And we know what a highly participatory democracy can descend into when the base human instincts take over down the track. I mean, what makes you think, Richard, that you have a success long term? Because I presume this is the thinking among the Occupy movements, that you can change the paradigm.
Absolutely. I wouldn't say that the solution is going to come within the Occupy movement, though. I would say that Occupy is simply about opening the discussion. And the discussion is, how do we create a system that works for everyone? And I'm yet to find anyone that has a problem with that, that discussion question. Yeah. And just about everyone I've talked to has had some interesting solutions to suggest. The way I see it, we've got a lot of very clever people in this country and in this world with a lot of very clever ideas, but every time you hear a good idea, it seems like it just sort of floats in the ether and we haven't got a very good system for managing these good ideas.
Yeah. A highly participatory democracy, again, though, is it consumes time and energy and requires...
I mean, we've learned that over the last month. It takes a lot of work. It's certainly a lot more work than ticking a box once every 3 years, but it means that you've got a vested interest in it. I mean, it's been absolutely inspiring seeing 50 to 60 people in a meeting who've come together with absolutely disparate views, and often these are very disenfranchised people that aren't necessarily trying to get along with everyone, and then by the end of the meeting they've made a decision that everyone is happy with, and it's sometimes they're quite large decisions, about what are we actually here for, what are we trying to say, how are we going to do it, and all this sorts of stuff. It's really inspiring seeing it happen in front of your eyes.
What will you be doing in 6 months' time, Richard?
I'll be occupying.
Do you think you will still be there?
It's impossible to say. I'm just going to do my best to keep the discussion going. I'm not throwing my whole weight behind the Occupy movement as such. I think what we've got to say is a lot bigger than any movement. Any movement can get dissuaded, and any movement's going to come to an end at some point. But what we're talking about is simply equality for all, and I don't think that's a pie-in-the-sky idea, and I think that we can campaign on that for till kingdom come.
It's been interesting to get you on, and we may again, Richard.
Yes.
Thank you. The very articulate Richard Bartlett on the panel.